What defines a remake? It's a broad term that means to remake something again or differently. The term has been thrown around a lot in the last decade as we currently live in an era of revisiting old media and bringing it back. Remaking a game can be seen as a means of banking on nostalgia with a cheap cash grab. But when executed right, you can make the definitive experience for a game, bringing in new fans and old ones. We live in an era where remakes, remasters, and reimaginings are far more common than new releases. Interestingly though, the topic of today's discussion, Metroid Zero Mission, comes from an era where remakes were far less common. The Game Boy Advance was no stranger to remakes, ports, or remasters of old games, but when they did them right. When handled with the right care, a remake can outright replace the original experience, ironing out clunky designs and giving a game a new coat of paint. No game is more clunky than the original Metroid on NES. Groundbreaking for the time, but aged like milk. It's unfortunate because the game really was ambitious. A little too ambitious for its time. The NES simply couldn't deliver the experience Nintendo set out to make. It seemed more like a tech demo of what the future games would be like. That being said, NES Metroid still did things right. World building, puzzle solving, isolation. While the first decade of the series was scarce on releases, we can thank Retro Studios in the 2000s for reinventing the series with their stellar first entry in the Metroid Prime series. Due to the resurgence, the Metroid series entered a renaissance of sorts. The amount of games released during the 2000s were over double of the 80s and 90s. Of course they'd remake the original Metroid. It's far too important a title to be left behind in the past. See what I did there? The story is the same as before. The Galactic Federation established peace, the space pirates kidnap the Metroids, and Samus is hired to take them out. The game makes no effort to hide Samus's gender this time, but by 2004, it was no longer a secret. The intro, however, does throw in that Samus was raised on Zebes, giving the story a far more personal touch than we'd known back in '86. Back where it all began, what's old is new. Except the pea shooter. That's still old, and that still needs to be upgraded. Make no mistake though, as Samus has never controlled better. She can aim in all 8 directions, shoot from a crouch position, even her wall jump is back to its SNES glory. You know the drill, head left to get the morph ball. Unlike the original game, which never told you what your power-ups were, you're now brought to an equipment screen. It's quick and effective. It's great, because I can see why people were so afraid of the series adapting to a tutorial slogfest after Fusion's linear plot-focused design. The music, the level design, Samus's look, it's so much more iconic. While playing, you'll quickly notice just how differently Samus feels compared to how she did in Super Metroid. Her floatiness is gone. She's more snappy and it feels just as great, if not better than it did in Fusion. Holding R to cycle through missiles is still so good. This may be a reimagining of the original game, but Samus has learned a lot of tricks since '86, and it's surprising to see almost every single one of her iconic power-ups has made the transition to Zero Mission. Only the iconic ones though. Love it or hate it, Fusion was daring. It took the franchise to places it had never been before. But Zero Mission is safe. We've seen all these power-ups before, sure, but it works. Well, I mean, the power grip is now a power-up. I kinda like that though. It actually has a lore-based explanation why Samus can grab ledges. This kind of stuff shouldn't matter, but it's an attention to detail that they cared enough about to include, and I love them for it. Now, just because her old powers are here doesn't mean the game doesn't do interesting things with them. The speed booster has never been expanded on more than here. It's so much easier to charge up and let loose, and heck, even the morph ball can shine spark. You'll definitely get your use out of it, as this is one of the most puzzle-focused games in the series. Giving all the items will have you thinking outside the box often. Your creativity will be challenged with some head-scratchers. It makes collecting items much more satisfying. The game has a striking balance between Super's open-ended design and Fusion's linear pacing. The story too has seen this treatment. We've got the shortest opening in the series, lasting a mere few seconds. New cutscenes are present, but there are no lines of dialogue, just brief story beats presented with subtext. This subtext carries over to the gameplay as well. Chozo statues no longer just house power-ups. Early on, you'll discover these standing variations with glowing hands. You morph ball into them and they lower themselves, giving you a brief nudge where you should be going. You have a map now, which already spits in the face of the original. Unlike Fusion, however, you're not told how to get to where you should be. It's your responsibility to figure it out. After all, there's no Adam this time around. The level design will often take you off the beaten path to arrive at your destination through means that you may not have expected. Rooms have been radically changed from their original forms, and the inclusion of brand new areas will give even veterans some new life in this old world. No longer do I feel lost and confused. No more zigzagging around these narrow shafts. I know now that I need the long beam to progress through subtle hints in the level design, not before seeing the way to Torian. Later on, you'll pop out into that opening area from Super Metroid, and it was here that you'll realize just how serious the team was about consistency with what came before. Technically after. Speaking of, where Brinstar was desolate and empty in Super, Zero Mission presents it in its prime. More life and color, and this carries over across the entire game. This isn't about isolation anymore, it's about fun. It kind of reminds me of the beginning of Metroid II in that aspect. More than anything, this world feels lived in. Zebes is filled with an ecosystem that helps make this a believable planet once inhabited by various creatures before the events of Super. This grand adventure is backed by some of my favorite tunes from the entire series. The GBA's take on some of these iconic tunes gives such a layer of depth to them that the NES simply could not. Visually, this is my favorite art style of the series. The sprite work is colorful, detailed, and full of life. It's amazing what just 3 years of understanding the hardware can do. We went from this to this. The game really started diverging from its original design by the time I reached Kraid. NES had similar hallways that were similar to Lower Brinstar. Zero Mission has new terrain, more puzzles with creative use of the speed booster, cannons, and these new pulleys you can ride. Now, unfortunately, this part of the game houses one of the worst instances of backtracking. You have to go from Kraid to Norfair to get the high jump, and then back to Brinstar to get the Various suit before you can progress through Norfair. It's like this because the NES game had the Various suit there as well. There surely could have been a way to alter its location to give the game more flow. This is really the only instance of this, thankfully, but it does stick out like a sore thumb. The design of the world is brilliant nonetheless, as it eases you out of the hand-holding and into discovery. The deeper you get into the world, the less often you'll see the Chozo indicators, to the point where they aren't present at all anymore. I love this. Ridley and Kraid weren't much of a threat in the original game, and sadly, they aren't much better here either. They're much larger and bring spectacle to the fights, but go down in seconds with enough missiles. They're easier retreads of their fights in Super, meaning their strategies are the same, but easier. Fortunately, there are now a slew of new mini-bosses you'll find along the way. They have build-up too. Here's an example. You enter Ridley and find that your way forward is blocked because you don't have super missiles. On your way down, you saw this creature over here in a cocoon. On your way back, you'll notice it's gone and is dug away forward. You head through and see the super missiles just beyond your reach, before the boss gets the jump on you. You take it out and it crashes through the barrier, allowing you access to the super missiles. Almost every single mini-boss is like this, and it's great to see that this carried over from previous entries. After meeting their ends, the way to Torian is opened up. The Metroids below are much more of a threat than ever before. Before you reach Torian, you're shown a group of them feasting on the remains of a space pirate they killed. As soon as you touch down, you'll notice how much tougher they've grown. They attack in groups more often now. They're much faster than before, more ruthless, and stay frozen for far less time. Mother Brain, on the other hand, is more or less just as frustrating as before. She actually fights back now with a laser attack, but she's still not much of a threat. I've yet to die once in the game, which speaks volumes of the difficulty balancing in comparison to before. In Fusion, I died a lot due to the lower defense, combined with enemies being far more ruthless. Zero Mission, by comparison, is not that hard, even on normal difficulty. Anyways, you know the drill. Mother Brain is down, she sets off a self-destruct feature, and you must escape. Unlike the original though, you're no longer just climbing the chasm, but escaping the planet to your ship. An easy game, a rather quick ending. It's not bad. Zero Mission definitely could have done more too. Wait. Oh, you clever devs. Zero Mission is far from over. Rather foolishly, Samus removed her suit prematurely and got shot down. Her ship destroyed, her suit gone, and all she has to fight back is a rather useless emergency pistol. Samus has no choice but to sneak into the space-powered mothership and commandeer a ship to get off planet. She's still as agile as before, being able to shoot in all directions and wall jump. But she's even weaker than in Fusion, and unlike in that game, she can't fight back. Her pistol can only stun enemies for a few seconds, buying her some time to run. The genre of the game has been flipped on its head entirely. Before, we had an action-packed romp through some colorful maps. Now, we're isolated, alone, defenseless, and are forced to sneak our way through without being detected. It reminds me greatly of the SAX sections, but with more stakes. When you're caught, the music amps up, alarms blare, and you're swarmed. You have no choice but to run. It's a steep difficulty spike, but one I appreciate. Deep in the ruins, you'll discover a mural depicting a familiar suit. Samus stands before it and a flashback triggers. Samus has been here before. It's confirmed that she was indeed raised here by the Chozo. Looks like they've got one last test for our hero. A boss fight, the only one of its kind with the Zero suit. When she passes the test, when you, the player, pass the test, you're rewarded handsomely. Earlier in the game, you'd find these mysterious items that aren't compatible with your suit. They'd emit this almost foreboding tune each time you pick them up. When you complete the test, those 3 items reveal themselves to be the gravity suit, space jump, and the plasma beam. Samus is at her peak form. A much grander version of the Brinstar theme plays, and you begin tearing through the very space pirates who gave you trouble for the last 20 minutes. Rooms that you had to be careful through and run away are torn apart. Samus invokes fear in the pirates as they're now hiding and running away from her. They made the mistake of not letting her go. They unknowingly created the very creature they'd learned to fear from then on. It's a power trip that you, the player, have earned, and the payoff is oh so satisfying. No more guidance. It's up to you to find your way out after obtaining the power bombs. Everything has been leading up to this point. You're surely about to be met with a truly daunting final boss. Ridley built a robot of himself? He looks so cool! He's the easiest boss in the game, though his difficulty depends on how many items you've collected. It sucks though. Everything that led up to this moment was a massive spike in difficulty, and to end it on such an anticlimactic fight is, admittedly, a bit of a letdown. One more self-destruct initiated, and currently the final one in a 2D Metroid. You've got mere minutes to escape. Zero Mission has made some wonderful changes in comparison to not only the original Metroid, but previous 2D Metroids as well. Screen transitions are a snap. The map feature is so helpful. Now having open circles to indicate an item and a dot to indicate that it's been collected. Red doors now open with only 1 missile instead of 5. The snappy gameplay is tight and faster than ever before. Virtually no text to slow down the pace with story beats or tutorials. A hard mode that you can unlock upon completion that really tests you. Tons of unlockable pictures depending on completion, time spent, and difficulty. You even unlock the original game after beating it, showing how far we've come. The lore has been greatly expanded upon, shown even in the ending as a young Samus has added her own personal touch to the mural we saw. Zero Mission is hands down my favorite game in the entire Metroid series. Not just 2D. This is the perfect culmination of everything the series came to be known for over the years. It's easily replayable and fun no matter when I come back to it. It's not Super, nor is it Fusion. It's something more. It may not be as grand as Super, or as simplified as Fusion, But even being a remake, it has its own identity. Now that I've beaten it, we've reached the end of this journey. When I began working on this season, I knew it was going to be one of my most ambitious projects. I knew some of these games would test me. Some would make me learn. Some would change my opinions of old. I can say with much more confidence than ever before that I am a Metroid fan. This series isn't for everyone, but when it clicks with you, you're in for a wonderful time. We're not done with 2D Metroid, but for this season, we are. That is, unless we can reach my Patreon goal. I set a goal that if we can reach a threshold by the end of the year, I'll be taking a look at the newest entry in the 2D Metroid series, Metroid Dread. If you want to see that episode come to be, please consider supporting me on the GamingSpex Patreon, link below. Next season, we'll be taking a look at the rise and fall of one of gaming's favorite purple dragons. I'll see you guys next season. Take care!